Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about some new bronzers that have been released to the market since the beginning of 2025, and I will be trying those out on my own fair skin. And I have shot the video footage in natural light like I have right now, and so hopefully that will give you a good sense of what the bronzers look like on my skin, even when they are applied very softly. And in general, I do really like a really soft look and a natural look during the summertime, and so that can be a little bit challenging to get in terms of getting the right bronzer shade, and it also can be challenging to demonstrate, and so that is one thing that I have really worked to do, is to be able to show you what these different bronzers look like on my skin. And so the bronzers that I'll be discussing in this video, first of all, there's a new bronzer line from Polite Society, and I have this bronzer in the shade French Riviera. And so this is a bronzer that I actually have been really liking on me, and so I will try to give you a good sense of what the color of this one is like, as well as the formula. And in addition, I realized that I've never really talked about Polite Society on this channel at all, and I do have several different products of theirs that I have been liking, so I've been trying out their foundation, and I have 3 shades of their Polite Pops blush sticks, and I have their mascara, so I'll be talking about all of those products today. And then Laura Mercier has come out with a line of 5 different bronzer shades. And so I did pick up 2 of these. So I have, first of all, this one, which is called Saie, which is available through Sephora. And then I also have an additional one that is called Saint Croix. And this one, so far, I have only seen it on the Laura Mercier website. And so I do have both of these shades. And so I will be comparing these so you can see what the differences are and whether or not one of these might be better for you than the other. And then Haus Labs has redone their entire bronzer line. So I do not believe that the formula is any different. The ingredient list looks exactly the same. The old version did not have talc in it, and this version does not have talc either. But they do seem to have redone all of the shades of these bronzers and to have restructured the whole line. And so I did pick up both of the lightest 2 shades. So this one is called Soleil Sand, and this one is called Bronzed Umber. And I do think that these shades are considerably different than they used to be, and so I will be demonstrating what the differences are in this video, because I do have all 3 of the lightest shades that used to be around, in case you happen to have one of those yourself and are comparing. And then also I have really been liking the new Westman Atelier liquid bronzer, and so I have this one in the lightest shade, and I have been demonstrating that on my skin, and I think it looks okay on me as well. And then in addition, there are some blush shades that are kind of muted and that I think do have the potential for working for people with really light skin as a bronzer type of a look. And so first of all, I have a couple of products that are new from Nars. And so I have one that is in the shade Impassioned, and I have one in the shade Cherish. And so I will be demonstrating these used as bronzers on my own fair skin. And then there are a couple of other shades of the Nars blushes that I think also have some potential for some people. And so those shades are Behave and Sex Appeal. So I'll be talking about those as well. And then Westman Atelier also has a new line of powder blush, and so I picked up one of these shades, and this is in a duet of a blush shade that's called Mimi, and then there's another blush shade that's called Coquette, but I feel like this Mimi shade actually works fairly well for me in terms of giving me a bronzer look, or at least in terms of serving as a sort of a topper to intensify the bronziness that I'm getting from some other products. So I will be showing you that one. And then Tower 28 came out with a line of different blushes, and so I picked up one that is in a fairly muted shade, and this one is called Long Beach Iced Tea, and I do think that that one has worked fairly well for me as a bronzer. And then for a few more new blushes that I have in kind of muted shades that I think have been contributing to me getting a kind of a bronzy type of a look. And so the first ones are from YSL, and so I have this one, which is in the shade of Rose Haze, which is number 6. And I do really like this particular shade, and I think it has been really pretty on me. And then I also have this one, which is called Nude Lavalier, and so I will demonstrate both of those in summertime looks. And then for a long time, I've been a fan of these blush sticks from Haus Labs, but in the past, they have only come out in pretty bright colors. But this summer, they have come out in some new shades that are more like earth tones. And so the one that I picked up is the lightest one, which is called Glassy Ginger. And I do think that this has been a really, really pretty look to contribute to a bronzy type look. And that is the blush that I'm wearing today. And then in addition, I have a few more blush products, and so I have this new one from Bobbi Brown, which is called Pot Rouge Velvet Matte, and I have this in a shade that is called Tea Rose that I think is a muted enough shade to contribute to a bronzy type of a look, at least for some people. And then I'll also be discussing this new Super Suede blush from Saie Beauty, which is called Mia. And I have this new Rare Beauty Bouncy blush, and this one is in the shade Hope. And then in addition, I'll be talking about some of my other favorite shades and products that can be used as bronzers and showing you those as well in this video. And then one other thing that I will be doing in this video is a little giveaway of some bronzer related items. And so those are actually from Jones Road. And so if you're interested in those, then I'll be talking about those later on in this video. And so first, a little bit of information about me. I am 60 years old and I have dry and very sensitive skin. And I've never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery, and I'm not really intending to do that. And so my goal in using makeup is to hopefully look a little bit fresher and maybe even a little bit younger as I move into my 60s. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my skin, and I know that those tend to be really irritating for many other people as well, and so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel. So let's talk first just about the whole concept of bronzers and what can make this so confusing for people, because I do think that I was very confused by this topic for quite a long period of time, and I do think that that's the case for a lot of other people as well. And so one thing that I think makes it confusing is that people often use the word bronzer to refer to what I believe to be contouring. So I think that contouring is generally accepted to be to use a shade that is a bit more gray than the natural skin tone in order to create a concept that the skin looks a bit more angular or a bit more chiseled. And so, for instance, you may use a contour product and you may use it underneath the cheekbones in order to make it look like you have higher cheekbones and more definition on the face. Or you may use some of it like underneath your chin or along your jawline in order to make that look a little bit less fleshy and a little bit more structured. And then some people may put contour on their nose to try to change the shape of their nose a little bit, or along the sides of their forehead. And so I think that in particular, if people feel like their face is a little bit too fleshy, something like that, then contouring might be seen as appropriate. I also think that contouring became really popular in the earlier days of YouTube influencers, because they would be filming and they would be using really heavy foundation and really bright lights, and so it would totally wipe out all of the shading on their face. And so therefore, if you take some of the contour and you bring some of those shadows back into the face, then that can look a lot more attractive, especially on camera, even if it doesn't necessarily look as good in the real world. And so personally, I haven't used contouring that much myself, and I have experimented with it a little bit on camera, and sometimes people actually say that they do like the way that my face looks when it's contoured just a tiny little bit. So that's something that I'm interested in exploring a bit more. But in general, I kind of feel like my face is lost a lot of fat volume in it as I have gotten through my 50s. And so therefore that contouring is sort of less attractive to me than it might have been 10 or 20 years ago when I was younger. And bronzing, in my opinion, is something that's really different, and that is really designed to just make it look like you have gotten a little bit of sun and that your face is a bit more tan. And so therefore you're applying it differently. You're supposed to be applying it more on the places on your face where the sun might hit it. So you may want to apply it specifically on the cheekbones, but more like going straight across and across the bridge of the nose. And then you may also apply it more lightly on other areas of the face, just to look like you have a little tiny bit of what your skin would naturally look like if you have a tan. And then it's also the case that a particular shade of product that someone might use for bronzing versus contour should be a little bit different as well. And especially if we're talking about people with lighter skin tones, then contours tend to have a bit more gray in them because shadows tend to look gray. Whereas a product that is a bronzer should look more like your natural skin tone, but what it looks like when you actually have sun hit it. And so, for instance, for some people, if they have a hue of their skin that's more yellow, then they may want a bronzer that has more yellowish in it. If they have a skin tone that's more green, then they may want a bronzer that has a bit more olive tone in it. And for me, I feel like my own skin tone tends to be fairly neutral when it is pale, but then it tends to get kind of peachy when it gets a little bit darker. And so therefore I do feel like the shades of the bronzers that have worked best for me in terms of creating a natural look have had quite a bit of that peachiness in it and not really any gray. Now, it does seem to be the case that there are some people that have skin that, for instance, is light enough and cool enough that even bronzers that may look kind of gray on me may look great on them, and bronzers that may look a little bit pink or to look a little bit sunburned on me, that they actually may look like they are kind of more of a bronzy look that is more in keeping with their skin tone. But for me, I do think that a bronzer that tends to be kind of green will look really muddy on me, and a bronzer that is more on the yellow side will make me look a little bit like ill and a little jaundiced, and that the peach shade is really good for me. But other people that have skin that is more on the cool side may look really problematic when they're wearing a bronzer that's too peachy, and that may actually turn out to be really orange and fake looking on them. So it really depends on what your skin hue is, which kinds of bronzers may work for you. Now, it also is the case that there are some bronzers that have more of a pink or a red hue to them, and those can certainly be attractive on people that do have a pink undertone or a pink hue to their skin. But I think even for other people in general that those can be a little bit more easy to wear for everyone, because even if you don't have that much pink in your skin, it can look like you have had a little bit of a sunburn or just that you're wearing a little bit of blush, and both of those can be attractive. So the difficult thing with all of this is that I don't feel like companies are doing a very good job of letting you know what the particular hue or the particular undertone is of the bronzers that they are selling. And so it can be very difficult to tell online, because usually the pictures that they are showing you are taken in studio lighting, and so that tends to wash out all of the subtleties with regard to the colors. And they tend not to even give very good descriptions. And I do think it's easier if you can go to a store and see what the undertones are of the bronzers by trying it on in the store. But again, I think the lighting in Sephora or these other kinds of makeup stores tends to be so bad that really you need to go outside and actually try it on your face. And one other thing that I thought that I would mention is that I do think that it is better if you are trying to create a natural bronzy type of a look or a natural contour look to try to use a product that is more matte. Because I think that while a shimmery bronzer can be really pretty if you use it either for contouring or as a bronzer that is sort of darkening your face in general, that is at best going to make you look really sweaty, and at worst it's going to make you look really fake and like they're just way too made up and not in a good way. Now, I do think that there's a place for a shimmery bronzer, and that's more like a bronzy highlighter as far as I'm concerned. And so I will, in a lot of cases, use a shimmery type of a bronzer on top of the other bronzers that I've used just to give it a little bit more dimension and life. And so that is what I did in the makeup look that I'm wearing today. I started out with this Polite Society bronzer, and I used that to darken my skin in general a little bit. And then I put on a little bit of this Haus Labs product in the Glassy Ginger shade to give myself a little bit of added color and a little bit of more dimension to it. And then I have this product from Jane Iredale, and this is called Peaches and Cream, and this is one of their shimmery bronzers, and so I just added a little bit of that. And so I think that at least in the real world, and maybe also on camera, that this is a look that is looking summery to me, but without looking fake or like unnatural. So let's start out by talking about this Polite Society Cabana Club bronzer. And so this is $34, and it is available in 4 different shades. And so I have the lightest shade, and this is called French Riviera. And these bronzers, to my understanding, they are just available at Ulta and on the Polite Society website. And Polite Society is a new company that was started, I think, 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And the person who founded Polite Society, he also was the founder originally of Too Faced, and he left that company a few years ago and then started this new company. And so what it says on the website is that the bronzer combines both powder and liquid for an innovative texture that blurs and smooths while creating an authentic sun-kissed glow. So this product does not have any talc in it, and it does have some safflower oil, some hydrolyzed hyaluronic acid, and it's a silicone-based product. And it says that it has vanillin in it, but I am not smelling any kind of fragrance in this at all personally. And in their instructions, they are definitely suggesting that this is a bronzer rather than a contour, and they're not really suggesting that you use it as a contour. So what they say is using a brush, swirl into the bronzer, making sure to tap off any excess product. Apply where the sun naturally hits, such as the top of the forehead, temples, cheeks, and jawlines for a sun-kissed glow. So I did try swatching all 4 of the shades of this bronzer in the Ulta store, and I do think that these are really appropriate as bronzers rather than as contours. Now the lightest shade I think is quite a peachy type of a bronzer, and that is something that I personally really like, but I obviously don't think it's going to be appropriate for everyone. Now, as I say, I do feel like I tend to do particularly well with bronzers that lean towards being more peach, and that if I get a bronzer that has any green in it at all, I feel like it does make my skin look a lot more dirty or kind of muddy looking. But in any case, the bronzer that I have really kind of liked in the past has been this one, which is from Clinique, and this is called the Powder Pop Flower Bronzer in the shade Solar Pop. And I do think that this one is quite on the peachy side. And this one has been discontinued, so I've been sort of unhappy about that. But I do think that this lightest shade of the Polite Society bronzer, that this one is about as close of a match to this Clinique bronzer that I have ever found. And so when I swatch them next to one another, I do think that this one from Polite Society, it is a little bit more gray, but I don't think that it is a big difference, and I don't think that it looks gray on my skin. And in general, I do feel like when I've been using this Polite Society bronzer on my skin, that I've been able to use it somewhat with abandon to create more of a tan type look, and that it does still look pretty natural on me. So I've been really happy to find that. Now, of course, if people have a different hue or a different undertone to their skin than I do, then this particular bronzer may look really too orange on them and may not work for them at all. And for instance, I did see a video with a woman named Shelly, who has a YouTube channel called Geek Out of Water, and she has an undertone that I think is more just pink. And she said that this one was way too orangish for her. And she actually ended up using another shade, the second darkest shade, which is called Palm Royale, which had more of a reddish undertone. And she said that when she was able to use it really sparingly on her skin, that was able to give her a bronze that she thought looked nice. And I think that is something to remember also, is that when it comes to bronzers, and particularly when it comes to creating a natural bronze look, that the undertone of the bronzer may be much more important than how deep the color is, because you can use less of a bronzer and have it still look nice. But if the undertone is wrong, then it's just going to look wrong. And I do think that that bronzer that she put on looked okay for her, at least in terms of the video footage. And at least in my small Ulta store, all of those bronzer shades are available, and so those would be easy to go in and try for a lot of people. And so what I thought I would do is to talk about the rest of the Polite Society products, and I do have some footage of me putting on a full face of these with the bronzer included. And so the first product is the foundation, and this is called More Than a Pretty Face Skin Caring Foundation, and it is $42, and this is not a silicone-based foundation, and it was released, I think, sometime last year. And so I have given this a try on maybe half a dozen occasions at least, and so I do feel like I've gotten to know this foundation pretty well at this point. And this is a foundation that is definitely more of a full coverage type of a foundation. I definitely can very easily get full coverage with this one. And so that is not something that I personally wear very often or ever just on my own, but I do think that it is useful for us to take a look at some full coverage foundations on this channel to see if we can find any that perform well in the context of both people getting older and having more wrinkles or other kinds of issues like that on their face, and then also in terms of irritation. And supposedly this is a clean beauty brand. And I think that so far with this foundation, I've done pretty well with it in terms of it not irritating my skin. I have put it on over the Ilia Base Face Milk, which provides just a little bit of a primer, but as long as I do that, I've been okay with this. And so there are 30 different shades, and there are 10 levels going from very fair up until the darkest shades. And then for each of those levels, then there are 3 different options, which are cool, warm, and neutral. And I'm not seeing anything about olive, and so I am not sure if any of these shades are doing a very good job of providing any kind of olive skin tones. And so the shade that I picked up is Fair Neutral, and I do think this is a little bit light on my skin. And I do think it leans just a tiny little bit more yellow than I would like. I didn't really get a chance to go to Ulta before I bought this because it wasn't available in Ulta at the time, I don't think. But in any case, I don't think it looks terrible on my skin, and I do think that after I put it on and after it sunk into my skin, it started to look a little bit better. But I also think that maybe there's a better match for me. I'm not sure. And by the way, when I tried to find my shade on both the Ulta website and on the Polite Society website by entering foundation shades and other foundations that have worked well for me, that did not work well for me at all. So I wouldn't really suggest relying on that because I don't think that that is working very well in this particular foundation. And so what they say about this on the website is that this is a skincare meets makeup hybrid that promotes healthy skin and delivers long wear, medium to full coverage. And this is fragrance-free, vegan. It offers hydration. They say some of the ingredients that do offer hydration are glycerin, sodium hyaluronate, some jojoba esters, and niacinamide. And it has 91% natural ingredients and no alcohol. So as I say, I think that this foundation is quite heavy, and I think that in order to sheer it out enough to make it into much more light coverage, I would have to put a lot of moisturizer in it. But what I did do in this video is to try it out with a new product that I have been experimenting with, and this is from One Size, and this is called the One Size B12 Base Thinner Vitamin Pearl Serum. And so the idea of this is that it is supposed to be a mixing medium that you can mix into foundations to make it look better and also to make it a little bit lighter. So what they are saying is that it is a pearlescent mixing medium and serum that transforms foundation and enlivens skin boosting radiance both immediately and over time. And so this particular product includes B12, C, and E, beta-glucan and hyaluronic acid, and then some ceramides and jojoba esters. And it has these vegan crushed pearls in it to make it a little bit shimmery. And they claim that this is also extending makeup wear and delivering healthier looking skin in just 2 weeks. And it is a silicone product. And so I did try this out with the Polite Society foundation, and what I did is put the Polite Society foundation on one half of my face just straight from the bottle, and then on the other half I mixed some of this serum into it, and I think that both of the sides don't look that much different from one another, but in general I have found that this one size product, it's actually working fairly nicely with all the foundations that I've tried. And again, I don't think it makes a huge difference, but I also don't think that it has caused me any problems. And I think that, for instance, this Polite Society foundation is non-silicone, and this is a silicone product, but I think that when I mixed them together, it has worked really well. And I've tried this stuff with several other foundations, and I feel like it's doing about the same thing. So with just adding a tiny little bit more radiance to it, it maybe adds a tiny little bit more hydration, and it thins it out a little bit, and I think it makes it behave a little bit better in all of the cases that I have tried it. So I'm still experimenting with this, and I'm still figuring out how much of it to use in each foundation. But in general, I think that especially for foundations that may be a little bit difficult or may look a little bit matte, that this is a nice little product to add to them. And in general, I don't think that either of these sides looks bad on me. I think that personally that I look better without wearing the foundation at all. So I don't think it's a foundation that's making me look better. But I do think that if you really need some coverage, that this is one that is not going to look really, really terrible, or at least it didn't on me in the context of the issues that are going on my face with regard to wrinkles and things like that. And so it's not a foundation that I would absolutely be unwilling to wear, even though I don't think it's necessarily ideal for me in terms of the context of my skin that's getting older. And, you know, of course, this foundation, it doesn't have silicone in it, it doesn't have alcohol in it, it does have all of those skin ingredients in it, and it is pretty thick. And so for me, I haven't found that this is a foundation that will set on its own. I do feel like it needs quite a bit of help. And so I have started out by using this Makeup by Mario setting spray that I like so much, and that does seem to be successful for me to use with a lot of foundations that do have moisturizing in them. And I think that this one worked pretty well with this. But in general, I think that I really needed to put down some more powder after I put this on, and part of that could be because it's summertime now and my skin is not as dry as it was during the winter months. Now, Polite Society actually does sell a powder, and this is available in 3 shades. There's a translucent version, there is a pink version, and there's a peach version. And I think all 3 of those would work okay for me. And I haven't purchased that yet, but I'm thinking that I really should, because I want to do a video on powders in general. And I do think that that Polite Society powder would work really well with their foundation, and that it would do a really good job of kind of sucking up all the oil in this foundation and making it go fairly, behave a lot better. And for me, when I tried it on in the store, I didn't have this foundation on, and it did dry out my skin really quickly, even when I used just a tiny bit of it. But I think that as powders go that do absorb a lot of oil, that this one would be really good. It's a really light powder, it's really fluffy, and I think that it performs really well. It looked nice on my skin, it just dried it all up. But I think on top of this foundation, it probably would be lovely. And I do think if you have oily skin, it also would work very well. Now, the powder that I used is this one from YSL, which is kind of a very light lavender shade, or it's blue, but I think it's blue that's leaning into like periwinkle. And I think this is a nice powder, but it definitely doesn't suck up oil that well. And so it, even in combination with the setting spray, I don't think that it has been ideal for use with this particular product. I think that a powder that sucked up oil a little bit more would be better. I'm thinking of the Jones Road powder, for instance, or the Makeup by Mario powder. Those would probably be very nice. And also some of the powders that have talc in them, like, for instance, the Huda Beauty powder. That one might work okay with this foundation also. But I do think that even if you have really, really dry skin, you need to find a way to mattify it, because otherwise it's not going to look very good or feel very good on the skin. And then I also have a little sample of the Polite Society mascara, and so I did give that a try. This is called the Greatest Lashes of All Time Mascara, or Gloat, and it is $15 for a small tube or $27 for the standard tube. And they are saying that this is supposed to be a volumizing, lengthening, lifting, and curling mascara that serves legendary lashes without clumping or weighting them down. And I think in general that I've been okay with this. It does have a couple of preservatives in it, and so that did make me a little bit worried about whether it would be irritating for my eyes, but I feel like that's been okay for me. I don't think it's been a problem. And in terms of the performance, I actually think the performance has been quite good so far. And I've only tried it maybe 3 or 4 times, and so that is not that many times to try a mascara. But I do think that it's gone on very nicely. It hasn't turned into a big mess. I haven't had to get out my spoolie to separate the lashes. I've been able to wear it and hike and get kind of sweaty, and I don't feel like it has smudged or turned into a mess. And I kind of like this little wand. And so in general, I think that this has been a pretty good mascara, and I've been fairly happy with it, and I just wish that it came in brown, because I'm in search of brown mascaras right now. But even in the black shade, I think it's been fine. And so I've been wearing this for a couple of hours now, and so you can see what it looks like on my eyes today. And I think it's looking probably pretty fine. And then for blush, I have 3 shades of their blush sticks, and so these are called Polite Pops, and they are $28. But I did get a couple of these for half price during the Ulta sale, and so that is why I have all 3 of these. But I also do really like this formula, and this is supposed to be a cream to powder formula, and so even though it isn't a stick, and even though you can spread it fairly easily, it does turn into sort of a powder feeling on the skin. And I think that this actually looks quite nice on my skin. And I have 3 shades of these, and I think that the formula is nice, but that their shade descriptions are kind of off. So what I have here is Paris in the middle, and the one that is more brown is called Sydney, and then the other shade that is on the other side is called Malibu. And this one just has a tiny little bit of a gold shimmer in it, but it's very, very muted. And I personally feel like, at least here in the real world, that the Malibu shade and the Paris shade look almost exactly alike to me. And that is not supposed to be the case according to their descriptions, because they are saying that Malibu is a shimmering golden peach and that Paris is a baby pink. And I don't think this looks like a baby pink at all. It absolutely looks peach to me. And so I'm a little confused about that. And then the Sydney shade is supposed to be a flesh nude. And I think that that Sydney shade actually serves nicely as a bronzer. And so in this particular look that I filmed, I am using Sydney more as sort of a bronzing type of a shade, in addition to the Cabana Club powder bronzer, and then I put a little bit of the Malibu on top. And then in addition to the products that I already discussed, Polite Society has a few other products. So one of those is the Polite Pout Glossy Lip Balm for $21, and that one has a lot of different fragrance ingredients in it, including rose oil, and so I do feel like that would be irritating for me personally. There is the Big Mouth Lip Plumping Oil Gloss for $27, and that one is one that has like that whole bunch of different ingredients in it that are supposed to make your lips kind of irritated, including fragrance, menthol, hot pepper, ginger, limonene, linalool, eugenol, and citral. So I'm definitely staying away from that one. And then they have some eyeshadow and some face palettes, and those list fragrance on the ingredients, and so that makes me not interested in getting them, even though I did look at those in the store and I really didn't detect a fragrance. But what I feel like about fragrance is that it's not the smell that I generally object to. It's that ingredient tends to be irritating for me, even if it's supposed to be a clean fragrance, and so I tend to avoid those types of products. And so now I'm going to go on and talk about the Haus Labs bronzers. And actually, for each of the bronzers that I talk about in this video, I will do them in the context of just a really quick little mini makeup look. In the past, Haus Labs had exactly the same formula, which I think is a really, really stellar formula. I really like the actual way that these go on and the moisturizing ingredients, and supposedly they have fermented arnica in them, and I do think that my skin really likes them and that the actual formula looks nice on me. But in the past they had 12 different shades, and I actually picked up 3 of the lighter shades, and I found that really all 3 of those shades looked almost exactly alike to me. And that's the first one maybe leaned just a tiny little bit towards gray. The second one leaned just a tiny little bit towards yellow, and the third one leaned just a tiny little bit towards peach. But that in general, that I thought that really all of these really were much more designed as contours, and that the differences between the shades seemed to be really, really mild. And it actually did show Lady Gaga putting on one of the shades of this bronzer, but she was applying it in the way that you would an actual contour, by just putting it way underneath her cheeks and then kind of blending it out. And so I did find that to be kind of frustrating for me, because even though I did really, really like that formula, I did kind of feel like there really wasn't a shade that I felt really comfortable with and that gave me the kind of look that I was looking for, and so I tended not to use those products very much. And so when those old bronzers started to disappear from the market, I wondered what they were going to do and if they were going to fix the particular shade issues in that product. And I actually do think that they did. And at least when it comes to the lighter shades, that I am a bit happier with these particular bronzers than I was with the former versions. And I do think that it is kind of on the velvety side, more so than really almost any of the other bronzers that I have. And the ingredients that are in this include fermented arnica, squalane, hyaluronic acid, avocado oil, and silica, and then at least one more fermented ingredient. And so that may be why my skin likes it so much, because of all those fermented ingredients in it. Now, in terms of these 2 new shades, the lightest one is called Soleil Sand, and my feeling about this one is that this is a bronzer that I actually could use as a contour, that it's actually a light enough shade, and it's a slightly gray but not too gray. And so when I do feel like I have used this one as a contour, I think it's worked out okay for me. And then this darker shade, this is called Bronzed Umber. And I think that compared to any of the 3 lightest shades that used to be sold by Haus Labs, that this one is considerably redder, and I don't think that it is quite as gray. And so for me, I think that this is a product that I actually can use as a bronzer to give me the look of being slightly sunburned. And so it's not something that I would necessarily put a lot of all over my face, but I think if I use it more as like a bronzy type of a blush, that this one actually looks pretty nice. And so you can see that there's a little bit of a difference between them in the pan. And in this video footage, I put both of these bronzers on both sides of my face. So I used the lighter one as a contour underneath my cheekbones, and then I filled in with this darker shade with the reddish tone to it. And I still don't feel like they have a bronzer shade that I would really want to go over my whole face and darken it all up the way that I used that Polite Society bronzer. But at least I do feel like it's possible for me to use these particular bronzer shades pretty successfully now. And then as a little topper for this look, I used the product from Saie, which is called the Saie Super Suede Talc-Free Powder Blush for $28. And this comes in 6 different shades. And my feeling when I tried them on in the store is that they were all fairly highly pigmented. The one that I picked out was the least pigmented, I think, and this is called Mia. And Mia is described as a soft rose. They have another shade that might be interesting in the context of this video, which is called Chow, and that is supposed to be a soft golden brown, and I could kind of make that work if I didn't use too much of it. In general, again, I think I really like the formula of these Saie bronzers. They have squalane and glycerin and hyaluronic acid in them, and I do feel like they feel good on my skin and that they look nice on my skin. They don't look too powdery. And as powder bronzers go, I think that these have performed quite nicely, and that this Mia one does look nice in the context of a general bronze look, just to add a little bit more life to the face. And then as a lipstick for this look, I used the one that is called Monica, and this one is described as being a deep berry red. And it went on pretty dark, but I kind of blotted it down, and the nice thing about these RMS lipsticks is that they do keep a stain on the lips even after they have kind of worn off a bit, and so I think that that stain does look pretty with this look. And then next, let's talk about the Laura Mercier bronzers. And so, as I say, there are 5 shades of these, and the name is Laura Mercier Bronze Color Infusion Talc-Free Matte and Luminous Duo, and it's $42. And so each of these come with 2 different shades in the pan. So there is one shade that is more on the bronzy type of a shade, and then there is one that is like a really, really muted type of a blush. And the part that is like a really, really muted type of a blush has just a teeny tiny bit of shimmer in it, but really not very much at all, just a tiny touch of it. And so in this little mini look, I am demonstrating this on both sides of my cheeks. Now, I think that there could be a couple of different ways to wear this, and it really may depend on your skin tone. I think it could be that for some people, this bronzer shade could actually be used as a bronzer, and it could be used, to provide a little bit of a look of a tan. But I think that for me, this bronzer shade is a little bit more on the gray side, and even leaning in a little bit more towards green than I would prefer as a bronzer, and so for me it works better as a contour shade. And then the other shade that is supposed to be the blush with the little bit of a shimmer in it, I think that that one is fine for me in terms of a really, really muted blush bronzer type of a shade. And I don't see that these 2 palettes are really that much different in terms of undertone or in terms of hue. I think that they are very, very similar. And it's just that the 20 shade, which is Marseille, that's just a little bit darker. And so it really depends on how light of a look you want to get. I think that for me, if I want to use a really, really muted contour, that I'm better off using the 10 version, because then I can do just a very, very mild contour, which is what I feel like I'm more comfortable with. But in general, I don't think there's a lot of difference between these 2 palettes, and I think that most people could probably make both of these work equally well. And I do think that probably some people are going to swirl these together. And for me, I don't feel like that's been all that successful. I think that it just tends to get kind of on the gray side if I do that, or the gray side and leaning a little bit towards green, and it's just too cool in general. And that if I use this shade as a contour and then I use the blush as more like a bronzy blush, that works better for me personally. But that may depend on what kind of skin tone you have, and so many people may just be able to swirl their brush around in this and feel happy with that look. And I will say that I like the formula of these. I think that it works really well in terms of giving a really pretty look on the skin, and it is a talc-free formula, and so some people do care about that. But in general, I think that I do like the way it looks when I put it on that way. I do think it's a different sort of a look than I'm wearing today, but I think it looks nice. And I think that especially when it comes to this palette, the darker one, the 21, that this actually is also a really nice palette to use on my eyes as well. I think that that's a really pretty look as well. One other thing that I will say about this Laura Mercier bronzer set is that the shade of the blush, especially in the one that is called Marseille, this is actually really, really close to a classic Laura Mercier blush shade, which is called Ginger. And so I did swatch these next to one another, and in my eyes, they do look very, very close. And I do feel like Ginger on its own works quite well for me as giving me a little bit of a bronzy type of a look. And I also have a product from them that is called Liquid Highlighter, and I have this in the color Peachy Bronze, and so I thought that I would put this one on. And this is very similar to the Beauty Light ones from Charlotte Tilbury, and it has a little sponge on the end of it, and I actually really like this color. And I think that especially for summer that this is actually a very nice little color. And so I was happy to be able to get this out and use it again. And then I am demonstrating the new Westman Atelier Powder Blush Duos. And so this product is available for $75. And I have this in the shade of Mimi and Coquette. And so Mimi is described as a tawny beige, and then Coquette is described as a bright peachy pink. And so this particular product, it has phytosqualane, which is plant-derived, volcanic rock, and some pomegranate extract in it. And in general, I think that as powder blush goes, this one is kind of nice. I think that it is finely milled. I think that it looks pretty on my skin. So in general, in terms of the formula of this, I think that it's a very nice product. I think that I especially like these colors in this, but in terms of the actual formula, I think that it's perfectly usable. It goes on the skin very nicely. It looks pretty. It blends out really easily. I think that though, in terms of powder blush products, there are ones that I like better. So if I'm thinking about matte blushes, I really like the Haus Labs blushes better, but unfortunately those tend to be very, very highly pigmented colors, and so far they haven't come out with any that I think are really great for me, and so therefore when I use those I have to use them very lightly. And I also really like the RMS blushes, but in that case those are a little bit shimmery, and so I feel like that's very different. So this is a little bit different than either one of those, and I do think it's a nice product, but I also think that $75 is kind of expensive, even though you are getting two different shades. Now, what I found out in doing this video is that this shade of Mimi is almost exactly, in my opinion, the same as the well-known and well-loved shade of Beach Walk Betty in the RMS bronzers. And so I think that that is really interesting and really useful to know. And so personally, I really like the formula of this RMS bronzer. It's actually not a powder, it's like a gel product that's in pressed form. And so this goes on my skin really beautifully, and it doesn't look powdery at all, and it has just a tiny little bit of a shimmer in it that I don't think looks like a shimmery blush or a shimmery bronzer, but I think it just looks very natural and kind of appealing. And so therefore you can see what this looks like in comparison to the Mimi shade of the Westman Atelier bronzers. But in general, I feel like even though I have enjoyed using this Westman Atelier product so far, I think that all in all, this Beach Walk Betty shade and this particular RMS bronzer, this is really an unusually good shade. And because this shade has a little bit of reddishness in it, I think that it works really, really well as a bronzy shade of a bronzy blush, or a bronzer that leads into being a blush and looking a little bit on the slightly sunburned side. I think that really almost anyone can wear this particular shade, and that's why it's become so popular. And I think that that is why this Mimi shade has been so popular in the Westman Atelier blush sticks, and I think that this is a good general shade that most people should be able to wear, and that this peachy shade here is something that can just be used as a little pop of color that most people can wear also. But I will have to say that if you already have the RMS shade of Beach Walk Betty, or if you're thinking about getting it, then I think that that makes it much less important or appealing to be getting this particular shade in this Westman Atelier product. And as you may know, the Westman Atelier line, it has 3 different shades of these blush duos, and then it has 3 different shades of a combination of contour and blush duos. But in general, I feel like I am fairly satisfied with regard to this particular little duo, and that I will get a little bit of use out of it. But I don't feel so excited about this particular duo that I really feel like buying more of these, especially since they are pretty pricey. And then next, let's talk about the Westman Atelier Liquid Bronzer, and this is called the Sun Tone Hydrating Matte Bronzing Drops, and this is available in 4 shades. And I tried the 2 lightest shades on in the store, and I ended up purchasing the lightest of these. And this to me looks like sort of a pinkish taupe type of a color, so it does have a little bit of a pink lean to it, but I think that on my skin it actually does look quite natural, and without having quite as much of that peachiness going on, but it still looks quite pretty, and like I've just gotten a little tiny bit of sun. And in general, I have not personally had very good experiences with the other Westman Atelier liquid products. But in this case, I think that this has performed really nicely for me. It hasn't irritated my skin. I've liked the way that it has looked on my skin. I will say that it only has a 6-month usage life, and so that seems really, really short to me. And I would prefer that if I'm going to spend this much money, which is $58 on a bronzer, that it not go bad so fast. And so I am hoping that it'll last a little bit longer than 6 months anyway. And then for this look, I decided to add just a little bit of a pop of the YSL Make Me Blush Powder Blush in the shade Nude Lavalier. So these are $45, so this is another quite expensive product. And I actually do really like this particular shade. This one just has a tiny little bit of a shimmer in it, but it is described as being an iconic dusty pink satin. And these are talc blushes, and so that is something that not everyone is going to be really happy with. But they also do have some squalane and some rosehip oil in them. And I think this is kind of pretty. And even though I don't even really like pink on my eyes most of the time, I did put this on my eyes as a quick eyeshadow, and I actually think it looked kind of nice that way as well. So in terms of these blushes, I actually did go to Sephora and I tried out a whole bunch of the different shades of these, and I felt like I liked this particular shade a lot more than the matte ones that they had originally. Now later on I did get the shade that came out later, which is the Rose Haze that I'll show you in a few minutes. And I do like that one, and I have been really happy to have that one and this one. So I'm not sure why it is that I've had more luck with this shade and with the Rose Haze shade than I have with some of those others. I'm not sure if the formula is somehow different, or if it's just that when shades are more pigmented as well as matte, if they are a little bit more finicky in terms of how they look. But in any case, I have actually really liked this blush, and I've used it quite a bit, and I am not sorry that I have it, although I think that it may be that the RMS blushes are much better in general, and they are also somewhat less expensive. And then on the other cheek, I am putting the Rare Beauty Soft Pitch Matte Bouncy Blush, and that one is $27, and I have this in the shade of Hope, which is a nude mauve. And so what the website says about this particular blush is that it is a cushiony, creamed powder blush that gives the dreamiest flush of color with a lasting blurred matte finish, and that it has a putty-like texture that blends like cream and blurs like a powder. And it gives cheeks an airy, cloud-like flush with a smooth, weightless finish that won't settle, emphasize texture, or dry out your skin. And it's supposed to be sweat-proof and humidity-resistant. And it's silicone-based, and the moisturizing ingredients include papaya seed oil, pomegranate oil, glycerin, and cocoa seed extract. And I feel like compared to the other Rare Beauty blushes, that this one actually I like better. I still think it's a little bit more pigmented than I would prefer, but it's a lot easier to manage than the other blushes from them that I have tried. And I think that this is a pretty color that is a kind of a nice addition to any kind of a bronzy look, at least for me. And then now, as I say, some of these Nars blushes I think do serve well as a really muted blush for people with really light skin. And so first I have two different shades that are more on the pink side. So the classic one is called Behave, and this one is described as a matte pink mauve. And then the newer shade that was available in the special edition and then also is part of their permanent line now, to my understanding, this one is Impassioned, and this one is described as being a matte pink orchid. And these are $34, and I think that both of these look quite similar, at least on my skin. So they both are giving just a tiny bit of a flush of color that I think looks like it could be a really light sun burn, or just a little bit of feeling good in the sun. And so I do like the way that these look. I do think that they are very pretty. And I think that in general what they're leaning into is sort of a summery, youthful, English rose type of a look. And then I put a little bit of this Polite Society Polite Pop in the shade Paris on the top of it. And I don't think that this looks bad with it. And I think that maybe the little bit of peach in this actually does look pretty good to complement the pink and not have it go too far cool for me. But in general, again, I don't think that this Paris shade is actually a baby pink at all. I do think that it is much more of a peachy type shade. And then another new shade from Nars that I think works well for me as a bronzy type look is this one in Cherish, and this one is called a Soft Matte Peach Apricot. And I think that this one is actually very similar in terms of how it looks on my skin to this product from Danessa Myricks. And this one is called the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Blurring Balm Powder, a Lowlighter Soft Glow Highlighter for $25. So this is not exactly a powder product. It's more like a cream to powder product. And I think that this looks very pretty. And the shade that I have is called Low Key, which is a peachy gold. And this product includes dimethicone, so it's a silicone-based product, but it has squalane and hyaluronic acid, and it has a little bit of ginger root oil in it, but I don't smell it, and I don't think it has been irritating for me. And in general, I think that either of these products does provide a nice, slightly peachy look that I think looks very fresh and kind of pretty, at least with my skin, but that I think would work pretty well for people with a variety of different light skin tones. And then what I put on top of that one is the YSL Make Me Blush Powder Blush. And this is in the shade Rose Haze, which is described as a soft nude pink. So as I say, this is the shade that was not available in the US at the launch and that I was really disappointed about because I did think that it looked like it could be a good color for me. And so after it finally came to Sephora, I did pick this up, and I actually do really like this shade quite a bit, and I think it's a little bit unusual compared to the other kinds of products that I have. I haven't found really anything that seems like it's an exact dupe, and in particular, I haven't found anything in powder form that I think it's an exact dupe. And I think it's a good shade for me, and I think that the formula seems to work okay with this product. It doesn't seem like it's patchy or not looking great on my skin the way that some of those other shades do. So even though I think that there's been a lot of controversy about whether or not these particular blush shades might be worth it, I do think that this particular one has been a very nice one for me. And then the lipstick shade that I used in this look is Melanie, which is a vibrant Tahitian coral. And then I just kind of blotted it down a little bit so that it wouldn't be so strong. And then again, I used this Jane Iredale Shimmer Bronzer in the shade Peaches and Cream. I think this is a lovely product, except that it is quite expensive. So it is $48, but then the compact is $20. And so that does make this whole little thing quite a lot of money. But I still think that it's a really pretty product, and I think I'm going to keep it out during the summer because I think just adding a little bit of it to my look does make it look a lot better. And there are 4 different shades of those, and I think that all of them could be really pretty depending on what your skin tone is like. Now, one more thing that I will say about Nars is that they have one more shade that I think some people might be able to use as a really low-key type of a bronzy color, and this one is called Sex Appeal, and I didn't bother to put this one on because on my skin tone I feel like it is almost exactly the same color as my natural unbronzed skin, and so for people that are considerably lighter than I am, I think this could be a really, really easygoing product that would be kind of fun to use and would give just a tiny little bit of a peachy type of a tan. And then next we have a new blush from Tower 28, and this is called the GetSet blush, and it is $28. And so I have this in the shade Long Beach Iced Tea, which is an earthy rosy pink. Tower 28 actually sent to me this blush, and so I was happy to be able to give this a try. And I think that for me, this color works really well as a bronzy type of a color. It's just a tiny little bit more pink than other types of bronzers that I typically wear, but I think that that actually works really nicely for me. Now, what I did realize, however, is that this color is almost exactly the same color as this very popular shade from RMS, which is called Crystal Slipper, except, of course, the RMS shade has just a tiny little bit of a shimmer in it, but I think that it has enough a mutedness to that shimmer that it's perfectly okay to wear it just as a bronzer. And then this is also kind of similar to the other shade that's really popular from RMS in their blush line, which is called Maiden's Blush. So basically this is the same hue or the same undertone, but it's just that this is more of a muted version of the Maiden's Blush. So the RMS blush is $36. The Tower 28 blush is $28, so that seems like it could be a better value. So the issue for me with this Tower 28 blush is that I didn't actually drop this at all, and it was just in a basket with a bunch of other blushes, but somehow it got totally broken. And so now I really am going to have a hard time using this at all. And that is kind of on the frustrating side. I feel like it must be kind of on the fragile side. And so that makes me a little hesitant to suggest that other people buy it, because I really don't think this should have broken based on my own usage of it. And I'd be interested in hearing if other people are having issues with this one breaking. Other than that, I did really like the color. I thought that it performed fairly well. It went on really easily. But I still think, now that I know that this is really almost exactly the same color as this Crystal Slipper, this is really the one that I would suggest buying. I think that this is just lovely, and that the amount of shimmer that is in this is really, really pretty, and that for mature skin, this is a particularly nice product. And it is exactly the same formula as the RMS bronzer, so that is important to know too. And it's not that far from the shade of the Beach Walk Betty. It's just a little tiny bit pinker. And then as an addition to this look, I added a little bit of this new product from Bobbi Brown, and this is called Pot Rouge Velvet Matte Cream Blush, and it is $36. And the shade that I have is called Tea Rose, which is called a Musted Dusty Rose. Musted is an odd word, but in any case, I think this is a really, really pretty color, and I think that it goes on really, really nicely. It's silicone-based. Unlike the regular Pot Rouge products from Bobbi Brown, there is no fragrance in this, so I was really happy about that. It is a silicone-based product, but I think it's really quite nice, and it applies really easily and kind of blends in really easily. And I think that in addition to any kind of a really bronzy look, at least on me, I think that this is quite lovely. And so I do think that I'm going to try to get some more wear out of this over the summer in particular. And then, by the way, one other new blush that I just remembered does have a little bit of a summery look to it is this one from Natasha Denona. So this is a line of blush duos, and all of the colors are all kind of along the same family. And this was released really early in the spring or late in the winter, and I feel like this is much more of a summery type shade. And so let's go ahead and put a little bit of this on with this look, and I will show you what it looks like. And I think that in combination with many different kinds of bronzers, at least for me, I think that this is very, very pretty. So I didn't feel very excited about wearing this during the winter, but I think that both of these shades could be an okay look to be using now. So even though this was a little bit pricey, I feel like I may get some of my money's worth out of it over the summer months. And then there are a couple of products that are actually stated as being bronzers, but that definitely do have a bit of a pinkishness to them, or a lot of pinkishness to them. And so one of these is from Jones Road, and the Jones Road bronzer is available in 8 shades, but the lightest one is called Dusty Rose, and this is described as a tawny pink. And then the other one is from Mob Beauty, and so they have a line of cream bronzers, and they have a line of powder bronzers, but in both of those they have a shade that is more like a rose taupe shade, they say, and the one that is in the powder version is in the shade of M36, and then the cream one is M80, so you can see those shades here. And so I feel like, especially for people that have really, really fair skin, like maybe even more fair than I have, that those are really, really pretty, and that they actually do look like what those people's skin would look like if they got a bit of sun. In my case, I think that it is more like a sort of a bronzy blush, and I think it's also very pretty that way. And then to layer up that look a little bit and to add a little bit more of a dimension to it, I put on top of that the Haus Labs Color Fuse Glassy Blush Balm Stick in the shade Glassy Ginger, which is described as a dusty pink. And again, I think that I'm just really, really happy that this particular product is available in a more muted type of an earthy type of a shade rather than the really bright shades that all of the other shades are in, because I think that this is a really, really nice formula. And so this formula has fermented arnica, fermented shiunko, and goji berry complex, as well as some squalane and some other moisturizing ingredients in it. And I think that this is a really, really nice product, and that it looks really nice on my skin, and that it holds up a little bit better than I would have anticipated. I don't think that this is exactly a ginger shade. I think that it is much more pink than I imagine ginger as being, but nonetheless, I think that it is really, really pretty, and that it coordinates well with a variety of different kinds of blush that I may be using. And the lipstick that I put on for this look was the Pamela in the RMS Legendary Lipsticks, and this is described as being a deeply seductive, berry-bitten cool nude. And since I've been talking about both Bobbi Brown and about Jones Road, I would bet that some people may have come to mind this particular shade of bronzer, and this is called Antigua, and it was part of the Illuminating Bronzing Powder, and it was discontinued a couple of years ago, but nonetheless, a lot of people really did find this to be a really interesting shade, and that they felt like it was a shade that really did look like what their skin was like when it was bronzed. So I have been looking for quite a while for a shade that might look similar to that, and the one that I have found that I think that is the closest is one from Mob Beauty, and so this is the M31 blush, which is this one, and this is described by them as being a dusty mauve. And so I think that if you do like this particular shade, or if you do miss it, that one could be a good one that could be a substitute. The Bobbi Brown one did have a tiny, tiny little bit of a gold shimmer in it, but I think that it was very, very mild. So I don't see the Mob one as being different, even though it doesn't have that shimmer in it. And so now I can talk about the giveaway. And so for the giveaway, I actually have a bronzer from Jones Road, and I have their bronzer brush. And so a while back, Jones Road started to send me PR, and so they asked me if there was anything that I wanted to try. And I was working on my bronzer video, and so I said that I would like to try this shade in the bronzer, which is called Medium Tan. And the reason for that is because This was a bronzer shade that was one that they originally released as a special edition before they came out with the full line. And what they said at the time, I know, is that really anyone can wear this shade. And I think that the reason is because it is quite reddish. And so therefore I wanted to give this a try. And they ended up sending me 2 of these in separate orders, and then they also ended up sending me 2 of these bronzer brushes, which was a lot of fun, and I already had one of the bronzer brushes. And so I thought that I would give away this shade of the bronzer and the bronzer brush if people are interested in that. So I will try a little bit of this on so you can see what it looks like on me. I do need to go kind of gently with it because there's a potential for me to look quite sunburned. But I do think it's kind of pretty, and that many different people can wear it, even if they have either a darker skin tone or a really lighter skin tone, depending on how you put it on. And I did put on a little bit too much, so I'm just going to kind of buff it in a little bit. And I think that this formula is easygoing enough that it's pretty malleable, and you can make things work pretty easily for you. And I actually think for me this works also pretty nicely like in the fall, so as more of a look of a reddish type of a blush rather than trying to get a really bronzy look from it. And so here are the products that I'm going to be giving away. And so if you're interested in winning these products, then please go to the link, and then you can fill out your name and your email address, and that way I can draw from the people that are really interested in this at random, and then go ahead and give you this particular prize. And I will be paying the postage for this myself, so you will not have to pay anything. And I am going to have to limit this, unfortunately, just to people in the U.S. because I am afraid of having to deal with things like postage and import taxes for things to be going overseas. And then also I wanted to mention that the Facebook group that I have started is now up and running. And so I have really enjoyed getting to know a few people in the group and communicating with you all personally. And so I hope that if you are interested in joining the group, or if you are willing to be on Facebook, that you will go ahead and sign up for that as well. And so there is a link to the group in the description box, and the name of the group is 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Petrison. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if there is a bronzer that you have used in the past that you have really liked, then I would be interested in knowing which one that is in terms of both the formula and in terms of the shade. And then in addition, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And if you like the video, then I hope you will hit like. And Coco and I do love you very much, so I hope you are having a good early summer so far. Bye-bye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.